Hi everyone, my name is Anirudh Krishna and I'm a recent doctoral graduate from the Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department from the University of California, Irvine. I would like to thank Professor Adriana Briscoe for the opportunity today for me to present my work that was recently published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. I am more than happy to talk to you guys today about the infrared optical and thermal properties of microstructures in butterfly wings. I understand that you guys deal with color and vision in this class. However, today I'm going to talk about something that interests me with respect to the animal kingdom. Coming from engineering, I've always found animals fascinating. I've always found it fascinating that they live in such extreme environments. Take the polar bears, the Arctic foxes, and the minks that live in freezing cold. And I'm in no rush to join animals like the Tisodon velvet ant that live in the desert, or the butterflies that live in the tropics, or the fennec fox in the Sahara, or the birdwing butterflies of the Asiatic tropics, joined by their cousins, the birds of paradise, also in Asia. Now, the uniting thread among all of these animals is the fact that they live in diverse climates. So the question I ask myself to all of these animals is that how does nature optimize heat transfer for these animals to survive in extreme environments? And what can we learn from that for our own survival? When we take a look at heat transfer anywhere on the Earth, consider that you are, well, as you are on the surface of the Earth, you receive most of your heat from the sun. This heat from the sun, if you take a look at it on the electromagnetic spectrum, falls between the wavelength range of 300 nanometers to 2500 nanometers. You also give out your own heat. However, this falls in longer wavelengths. You emit most of your heat between the wavelengths of 7.5 to 14 microns. And you get rid of this heat with outer space, which is at 3 Kelvin. A balance between how much heat you take in from the sun and how much heat you get rid of to outer space determines how hot or cold you would be. So let's take a look at what happens to objects on Earth's surface and how we can optimize this heat exchange in order to better suit our needs in different environments. How much heat you lose is determined by what is known as Planck distribution. Planck's law basically states that if you are at a certain temperature, you are going to lose a certain amount of heat. And you do not lose this heat uniformly, however, you do lose it as a function of wavelength. It is a spectral distribution spread out across the electromagnetic wavelength range. For example, the sun, being at 5800 Kelvin, loses heat almost throughout the entire wavelength range from the ultraviolet to the far infrared. The human body loses much lesser heat, and that is spread out from the near to the far infrared. However, there are two big caveats to this. Taking a deeper look at this, if you were to simplify all the physics and the math, you would find out that not all objects lose heat equally. The first big caveat is that objects at different temperature lose heat at different wavelengths. The wavelength and temperature are interlinked in such a way that if you are hotter, you lose heat at lower wavelengths. The sun, for example, being at 5800 Kelvin, loses most of its heat at 500 nanometers wavelength. The human body, being at 300 Kelvin, loses most of its heat at 9 to 10 microns wavelength. The second big caveat is that not all objects lose the same amount of heat. Objects at a higher temperature lose significantly more heat than objects at a lower temperature. Balancing all of this is the fact that how much heat you lose also depends upon optical properties. Optical properties act as a gateway determining how much heat you can emit from your surface. The most important of these optical properties is emissivity, which is a sort of efficiency of getting rid of heat. Emissivity, or epsilon, runs from a value of 0 to 100%, or 0 to 1.0. If you had a high emissivity, say 1.0, you are going to be very efficient at getting rid of the heat from your surface. On the other hand, if your emissivity was 0, you would be very good at retaining heat and not getting rid of it. Going back to our original plot, considering the fact that you take in heat and you give out heat at different wavelengths, say if you were to control the optical properties differently at different wavelengths, then you could optimize heat loss or heat gain. You could control if you would get hotter or cooler. If you were to say block off all the incoming heat from the sun, but allow outgoing heat in the mid-infrared, then you would allow efficiently getting rid of heat. If you, on the other hand, were to block off all the heat loss from the mid-infrared, but allow all the heat gain in the solar spectrum, then you were going to heat up quite a bit. Animals make use of this, make use of control over optical properties to efficiently stay cool or warm in different climates. This control of optical properties is nothing new in the world of animals, especially so for butterflies. For example, take a look at this brilliantly blue morpho butterfly. What interests me about this morpho butterfly is the fact that there is, to my knowledge, no known blue pigment for butterflies, which means that this butterfly appears so vividly blue by hint of deception. It is deceiving you into thinking that it is blue. And how does it do so? If you were to zoom in to the wings of this butterfly, slowly you would start seeing scales. And on these scales, you would notice that there are microscale Christmas tree-like structures. These microstructures effectively reflect only blue light, which means that they control the optical properties in such a way that your eyes would only see blue. All of the other colors, or all of the light from the other wavelengths, are effectively transmitted through the wings or absorbed by the wings, leaving only blue color to reach your eyes. Apart from control over the visible or solar spectrum, what if butterflies also controlled the mid-infrared, which is critical for heat transfer? So I took a look at 4 other butterflies. Now I chose 4 butterflies from varying geographies and varying climatic zones so that they can act statistically as suitable representatives of a diverse society. I took the Archaeopropona demophoon mexicana from Oaxaca, the Celestrina echosidera from Colorado, the Heliconia sprucei from Ecuador, and the Limonitis arsemis aestianax from Florida. For each of these butterflies, knowing the fact that the microstructures on the wings have been important for optical control in other butterflies, I decided to perform microscopy. I zoomed into the wings of each of these butterflies, and slowly you start seeing scales. Going in depth into single scales for each of these butterflies, you start noticing patterns. There are periodic mesh-like structures on the wings of these butterflies. For my analysis, I took 100 different unit cell mesh-like patterns from various locations across the scales to get their geometric dimensions. The dimensions of these meshes range from hundreds of nanometers to a couple microns. I then input these parameters into my predictive computation to get a prediction of the optical properties, aka the emissivity of these microstructures. Taking a look at the R2 demo phone, its microstructures cause the wing to have an average mid-infrared emissivity of around 0.42. The Celestrina has an average mid-infrared emissivity of 0.2, while the Heliconius has a value of 0.52, and the Limonitis around 0.25. An immediately noticeable thing is that the varying dimensions of each of these microstructures result in their emissivity values being vastly different. Another noticeable thing, to me at least, is the fact that butterflies from seemingly warmer climates, like the Heliconius and the Archaeopropona, tend to have a higher mid-infrared emissivity value compared to butterflies from cooler or moderately cold climates. This probably hints to the fact that if you are in a warmer climate, you might want to get rid of your heat more effectively, and having a higher emissivity value in the mid-infrared wavelength ranges helps you do so. If you are in a cooler climate, you might want to retain most of your heat, and having a lower emissivity in the mid-infrared helps you not get rid of heat and retain it better. Apart from computational predictions, I also measured the mid-infrared emissivity values using a Fourier transform infrared spectrometer, or an FTIR spectrometer. Another cool thing that we did with these butterflies is to take a look at them under an infrared camera, or a thermal camera. This lets us take a look interactively at the emissivity of the various locations across the butterfly wing. And an immediately noticeable thing is that even though there are visible patterns on the butterfly wings, as you notice, especially so in the Archaeopropona and the Limonitis, in the infrared wavelength ranges, you do not see any such pattern. The butterflies have an almost uniform mid-infrared emissivity across their wings. So while visibly they might have patterns, in the invisible wavelength ranges, they are hiding an entirely different story. Comparing our computational predictions and measured values for the emissivity and other optical properties, we notice that there is quite a good match. This lets us know that our data can be validated, that we, with a fair degree of certainty, can believe in our data. While taking a look at the optical properties are interesting, I, as a thermal scientist, was approaching this problem for an entirely different angle. I was interested in knowing how these butterflies perform in terms of their temperatures in different climates and different environments. While butterflies that have a high emissivity, like the Heliconius and the Archaeopropona, have it so because they could effectively emit heat from their wings in a hotter climate, butterflies from cooler climates like the Limonitis and the Celestrina have lower emissivity values, so they can avoid emitting that heat and retaining it to stay warm. However, I had an innate question. How would these butterflies perform if they were subjected to the same control environment? In this case, Irvine, California. I took these wings to the rooftop of my lab to take a look at what the temperatures of these butterfly wings would be under the same environment. What I found out when I placed these wings on a thermally isolated stage is that butterflies which have a low emissivity and are adapted to a cooler climate tend to have a hotter wing than butterflies that have a higher emissivity and are adapted to a warmer climate. This is because, by virtue of having a higher emissivity, these two butterflies are masters at getting rid of heat from their wings, and so cool down considerably more, by around 7 to 9 degrees Celsius, cooler than butterflies that are not masters at getting rid of heat. What I learned from all of this is the fact that while butterflies and other animals, ostensibly so, are visibly appealing and have beautiful patterns, which themselves require a lot of study, they hide a lot in invisible colors. I tend to look at it this way. While there is a lot that we can learn from visible patterning and coloration, there are so many hidden truths, if only we care to look at them. Thank you very much for your time. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues, Xiao, Dr. Warren from Florida, Dr. Llorente Busquets from Mexico, Dr. Briscoe, and Dr. Lee, my doctoral advisor.